All right, we're online. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our webinar on corporate capture, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Muna Sabella. I recently joined ESCR as the program coordinator for the Corporate Accountability Working Group, and I'm very, very glad to be with you all here. So today we have with us a great group of regionally diverse members of ESCR Network who will be both introducing what we mean by corporate capture, but also get a little more in depth with looking at two cases of what corporate capture might look like on the ground. So please note that we very much welcome questions from you, from the audience. You can write the questions here in the general chat box, and hopefully we will get at least one question to go to four of our presenters. So before we start, I wanted to note a few things. First of all, you can change the language from Arabic to English to Spanish to French, depending on which language you would like to listen in. Right down at the bottom of the screen, next to on the left of where the chat box is. Another issue is I wanted to note that four of our presenters today are actually members of ESCR Network's Corporate Accountability Working Group. They're also leading on our work with regards to the Corporate Capture project. So I really want to thank them for their dedication to this project and for helping us to set it in motion. Another quick note I wanted to make is that through this webinar, members of the Corporate Accountability Working Group of ESCR Network are actually responding directly to the need for network-wide collective action identified in our Common Charter. So the Common Charter, which was originally an initiative of the Social Movement Working Group, was affirmed by our member in our global strategy meeting in November 2016. And through shared analysis among members during several meetings, the Common Charter came to be and saw that corporate capture was actually one of 5 main conditions that impact members of the network as a collective. So we hope that this webinar will motivate members and allies as well outside of the Corporate Accountability Working Group to look further into corporate capture and how it impacts your community, and if it impacts your communities, and how we can respond to it collectively. So let's go without further ado to our great presenters. The first speaker we have that I would like to introduce is Radiatu Sherry from the Natural Resource Women Platform. This is a grassroots network of communities and women's groups across the Mano River Basin, which just helped bring together a cross-country people's forum. So Radiatu will be giving a brief history of the network's work on corporate capture. So without further ado, passing on the floor to Radiatu right now.
Okay, so I'll be presenting on the background of corporate capture. Okay, like I said, I'll be doing my presentation on the background of corporate capture. The corporate capture project of the network, which is under the Corporate Accountability Working Group, actually challenges corporate capture by researching, raising awareness, and supporting collective action to address the problems. So back in 2013, at the Business and Human Rights Forum of the ESCR-Net, that was attended by members of the ESCR-Net. Members were able to identify the impact of corporate capture on human rights. And then after identifying, they were able to come up with few points from a scoping study to be able to examine the linkages between corporate corruption of democratic processes and the consequent human rights impacts at national and subnational level. They were also able to come up with the point where there can be analysis of range of available and feasible strategies. That is for combating corporate capture, including national level policy and legislative reforms. There were also the issue of facilitating civil society campaigns to be able to advocate for the adoption of reforms that will effectively address corporate capture and better safeguard human rights. Back in 2017, at the Project Advisory Group Strategic Planning Meeting, there was an initial agreed upon definition for what corporate capture is. And during that strategic meeting, participants defined corporate capture as a means by which an economic elite undermines the realization of human rights and the environment by exerting undue influence over domestic and international decision makers and public institutions. So the Project Advisory Group has actually worked since 2014. It is a group that is regional and gender diverse. They have worked and at one of their meetings in 2015 and that of 2017, they were able to develop key objectives and work plans for the corporate capture project. They were also able to identify during the strategic planning meeting that one of the common global conditions threatening communities around the world is this corporate capture issue. So there has also been the stage where they have been able to develop or identify 8 elements of corporate capture that my colleague is going to be presenting on, Fernanda. There's also been advocacy position and engagement in relation to the evolving UN treaty that successfully influenced the text of the Zero Draft. Many of us that are on this call today maybe were part of that campaign. And there has also been research on policy and legislative mechanisms to map the ways corporate capture is being addressed. And I can tell you that this is something that is still in its developmental stage. And then you remember Moana just talked about a video that was supposed to be looked at before the presentations could start. There's been a video animation on corporate capture that can be seen in English and Spanish. And then for 2019, the network actually decided that there will be a wider conversation about corporate capture to the network working groups. So the focus will actually be on the impact of corporate capture as it relates to land, housing, and natural resource rights. So the corporate capture also has impacted women. So there's a requirement that women take leadership on corporate capture issues. And how are we going to do these issues? We said that it will be done through raising awareness about the trend of corporate capture. And then there will also be strategies developed to be able to counter corporate capture. Thank you. That is a very short background of what the corporate capture project is.
Thank you very much, Radiatu, for that very rich presentation. Next, I will give the floor to Fernanda Hoffenheim from Poder, an organization that's based in Mexico. Fernanda is one of the founding members of the Corporate Capture Project. So it's a great pleasure to have her here with us. And she will be going through the different manifestations of corporate capture. So without further ado, Fernanda, over to you now.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and probably good evening for some of you. I'm Fernanda. I'm from Mexico and Uruguay, and Poder works throughout Latin America. And as Mana said, we've been working on this issue for quite some time and are one of the founding members of the project. So when we first started to work on this project back in by the end of 2013, we identified at least 6 manifestations originally of how corporate capture plays out. How does this undue influence express itself? How does this happen on the ground? And I'm going to switch to Spanish now. Voy a hablar en mi idioma materno para todos los latinos y hispanoparlantes. Bueno, entonces habíamos identificado 6 manifestaciones originalmente y después, en 2017, tuvimos una reunión estratégica que comentó mi colega Radiatu, donde revisamos algunas de esas definiciones y características y concluimos que pues nuestro análisis alcanzaba a identificar al menos 8 manifestaciones. Seguramente hay otras que quizás ustedes mismos pueden ver en el terreno, en su trabajo cotidiano, pero aquí les voy a comentar las 8 que hemos definido. Una disculpa que se ve un poco desfasada el título de una de las características. Lo arreglaremos antes de enviarles las presentaciones. La primera característica o manifestación que identificamos fue la manipulación comunitaria. En esa fotito dice divide y conquistarás o divide y reinarás, y de alguna manera eso es lo que hemos identificado que están haciendo las corporaciones en el terreno con el fin de obtener algunas voluntades de líderes comunitarios a favor de sus proyectos. Esto se puede expresar de distintas maneras, por ejemplo, con apoyos financieros a algunas personas de la comunidad, con el fin de que se vean favorables a los proyectos en el terreno. También se expresa de formas más sutiles, digamos, mediante las actividades de responsabilidad social empresarial, que les llaman, ¿no? Crear escuelas, crear clínicas, etcétera, con el fin de alguna manera de comprar voluntades y muchas veces de dividir a las comunidades para que hayan conflictos internos que les permitan, por lo tanto, seguir avanzando con los proyectos sin que la comunidad tenga la capacidad de poner resistencia. Esto, además de definirlo en teoría, en un documento que tiene todas las definiciones, después le podemos pasar el link, que está en la página del proyecto, dentro de la página de la Red Desk, también está ejemplificado con casos en el terreno. La segunda manifestación es diplomacia económica, y esto originalmente lo habíamos observado específicamente en el actuar que tienen las embajadas, particularmente las secciones comerciales, para incidir y defender las inversiones de sus países. Muchas veces se pudo documentar cómo cuando alguna empresa violaba derechos humanos, cometía algún abuso que impactara el medio ambiente o tenía malas prácticas, las secciones comerciales de las embajadas trataban de proteger para que no se le demandara a esa empresa, no se la llevara frente a la justicia o no se le quitara la concesión. La otra parte, estamos en el número 2, estamos en la slide correcta, para los colegas que están pidiendo que pase. La otra parte que vimos es que últimamente también hay una influencia muy fuerte de las empresas en los espacios multilaterales, por ejemplo, en las Naciones Unidas, también con el fin de defender sus inversiones. Aquí vemos otras 3 manifestaciones. La tercera, que es interferencia judicial. Ahí vemos unos títeres, digamos unas marionetas con unos hilos, porque muchas veces las corporaciones, sobre todo las grandes corporaciones, estamos hablando del gran capital, tienen distintas prácticas o acciones explícitas que muchas veces son difíciles de documentar, pero que tienen el fin de interferir en los procesos judiciales. Por ejemplo, colegas en Brasil han observado cómo hay empresas que pagan retiros o vacaciones o seminarios supuestamente para futuros o actuales jueces y juezas, y esto de alguna manera les está intentando comprar voluntades. También hemos visto que se usan elementos procedimentales para dificultar los casos en contra de las empresas, es decir, para que las comunidades o los afectados demandando una empresa no puedan avanzar en sus procesos de justicia. Está también la compra de jueces, pero algo importante para decir es que estas manifestaciones no siempre están fuera de la legalidad, digamos, si bien son éticamente reprobables o cuestionables y no deberían ejercer esa influencia en estos espacios. Las empresas no siempre están rompiendo la ley, no siempre es un caso de corrupción o de compra con dinero, etcétera, ¿no? Muchas veces usan otros mecanismos más sutiles. La manifestación número 4, que es la interferencia en política pública y en el ámbito legislativo, es decir, en las reformas legales, tiene que ver con expresiones de lobby, por ejemplo, cuando en algunos países es legal el lobby y los lobistas están tratando de incidir el sentido de la votación en el Congreso. En otros países es ilegal el lobby, entonces se hace de manera más sutil, más soterrada, pero pasa de todas maneras. Y también tiene que ver con, muchas veces vemos que hay reformas, como se dice, fast track, de forma muy acelerada, que no pasan por procesos adecuados de consulta, y ahí tenemos muchas veces a los intereses económicos influyendo detrás. Lo mismo en política pública, particularmente en política monetaria, hay mucha influencia y mucha interferencia e incidencia por parte de las empresas. La manifestación número 5 la vemos en la privatización de servicios públicos de seguridad. Creo que quienes trabajan en el terreno han observado muchas veces que, por ejemplo, en las minas hay servicios de seguridad protegiendo un terreno que es federal o es nacional y que debería ser público. Ahí vemos que tanto se está usando fuerza privada para proteger territorio que es de la nación, como se están utilizando fuerza pública para proteger intereses privados. Entonces esto es algo también muy preocupante y también es una expresión de cómo las empresas han estado avanzando en en ganar terreno, digamos, en cubrir espacios y servicios que antes proveían los estados. En la medida en que nuestros estados se han achicado, se han reducido en tamaño y en posibilidad de proveer esos servicios. La siguiente, tenemos las últimas 3 manifestaciones que hemos identificado en el proyecto. Una es la puerta giratoria, quizás esta es una de las más conocidas o más documentadas, que es cuando funcionarios públicos pasan al sector privado sin este periodo de enfriamiento que se les llama, que ahora están empezando a contemplar en algunas leyes, en algunos países, que haya un periodo donde no pueden pasar al sector privado en su propia industria, podrían ir a buscar trabajo en otras esferas, pero por ejemplo, si trabajaron en el Ministerio de Energía, no podrían pasar a trabajar en una empresa energética, lo mismo con minería, etcétera, porque están trasladando un montón de información privilegiada, por ejemplo, sobre cómo se accede más fácilmente a licitaciones, a concesiones, etcétera. Y lo mismo al revés, muchas veces vienen del sector privado al sector público. Hay un caso muy conocido en Estados Unidos donde un vicepresidente, un VP de Monsanto, esta empresa que ha sido demandada en varios lugares por el uso y la promoción de semillas transgénicas, pasó al órgano regulador en temas de agricultura y alimentación de Estados Unidos. Entonces, pues ahí fue al revés, ¿no? Del sector privado para influir en la política de protección a la salud y de regulación de la agricultura en el país. Y esa puerta giratoria, pues gira en ambos sentidos. La número 7, que es cómo las empresas están influyendo en la creación de las narrativas, muchas veces cooptando narrativas que hemos nosotros promovido desde la sociedad civil, algunas veces desde la academia por mucho tiempo, por ejemplo, narrativas de defensa de derechos humanos, y y cómo están incidiendo, por ejemplo, en los medios de comunicación y en la manera en que se habla del desarrollo, por ejemplo, ¿no? Un modelo de desarrollo único, digamos, prácticamente, un capitalismo como único sistema que se promueve como algo bueno para las sociedades. Lo vemos en cómo se incide al hablar de combate a la pobreza, al hablar de justicia, al hablar de cuál es el modelo de desarrollo bueno, ¿no? Se necesita infraestructura, quienes resistimos los proyectos somos fundamentalistas ambientales, nos han dicho, y otro tipo de cuestiones, y toda esa incidencia que no la dicen empresarios o directores directamente, sino que las dicen medios de comunicación muchas veces. Ahí se ve cómo están incidiendo en esa narrativa. Y finalmente, la captura de instituciones académicas. Esto lo hemos visto muchísimo últimamente. Están financiando proyectos de investigación, están financiando departamentos. Por ejemplo, aquí en México, en el norte de México, una empresa que ha causado el peor derrame en la historia de la minería en este país, afectando a 25,000 personas en 2014. Desde hace 2 o 3 años está financiando el Departamento de Ingeniería Ambiental en la universidad de ese estado, y entonces estos académicos que antes eran muy explícitos en hablar de las afectaciones que tenía la minería en esos territorios, ahora de alguna manera ya no lo pueden hacer porque podrían perder el financiamiento para sus proyectos. Y lo otro, un ejemplo clarísimo, es todo el tema de cambio climático. De alguna manera vemos a veces a científicos, o esta cuestión de la pseudociencia, ¿no? Y de las contradicciones que a veces hay entre académicos y científicos cuando hablan del tema de cambio climático, y cómo muchas veces es favorable a las personas que están en contra de combatir el cambio climático. Entonces, básicamente esas son las 8 manifestaciones que identificamos. Luego les podemos compartir el documento donde está detallado todo esto que les comentaba, y también un reporte de casos donde tratamos de recopilar al menos un caso por manifestación para ejemplificarlos más claramente. Cualquier pregunta, por aquí me quedo. Gracias. Thank you, Mona.
Sorry about that. So thank you so much, Fernanda, for that excellent presentation. I think you described very clearly the different manifestations of corporate capture. So next we will have Shaida Nafisi from Corporate Accountability in the US. She will be speaking about a particular case of corporate capture at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So, Shaida, over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Mona. Thanks, Fernanda, Radiatu. It's great to be here with everybody and to see all of these languages in the chat box. As Mona said, I'm Shaida. I work with Corporate Accountability. We're a non-governmental organization based in the U.S. that for upwards of 40 years now has been dedicated to stopping abuses by transnational corporations and increasing their accountability to people around the world. So this topic is very apropos. So today, in terms of speaking about the UN climate talks, I wanted to bring this example forward because I think it really exemplifies how corporate capture has stymied the global response on this very important issue of climate change. Let me move on to the slides here. There we go. That's from our founding in 1977. So I don't think I need to tell the people on this call, from catastrophic hurricanes to whole countries being swallowed up by the ocean here, as you can see in the picture, it's clear that climate change is happening right now, all around us. And I think what is even more painful to reflect on is that we could have prevented the worst of this crisis. As you can see from this clip here, we've known for decades that we needed a global coordinated response to climate change. And that's why in 1992, governments set up the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or what I'll refer to as the climate talks or negotiations. They were designed to drive forward global commitments and action on climate change, and are important because they really are the only intergovernmental global space dedicated to creating international policy to address climate change, which is critical because, of course, this is a global issue. And yet, unfortunately, more than, 27 years later, we are running out of time. The International Panel on Climate Change says that we have less than 11 years to keep global temperature rise to below the agreed limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we need all countries to make binding commitments right now to keep fossil fuels in the ground, to ensure a just transition to renewables, and to hold accountable the fossil fuel industry and global north countries that have disproportionately fueled this crisis. So the question is, how did we end up here at the brink of climate catastrophe, even though we knew long ago that we needed to act? Well, to my next slide. For more than 50 years, big polluters, largely based in the global north, have done everything in their power to continue polluting and extracting. Just 100 fossil fuel producers, including oil, gas, and coal corporations, are responsible for 71% of global greenhouse emissions. These industries are the largest emitters of greenhouse gases and have a vested interest in maintaining that business model. And to that end, this is the IPCC report I wanted to talk about earlier. But back to the largest emitters. So to that end, these emitters and big polluters have spent billions on climate denial lobbying, sowing doubt, and policy interference. A report released just 2 weeks ago by our allies at Influence Map shows the 5 largest oil and gas corporations, that's ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, BP, and Total, spent upwards of $1 billion on branding and lobbying just since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. So big polluters and their industry trade groups have been blocking, weakening, delaying climate policy, and promoting dangerous distractions like carbon markets and geoengineering over real solutions. They fund a massive denial machine, as Fernanda was saying earlier, that sows doubt and confusion about the reality of climate change, and they also bankroll politicians. So that's the reality of corporate capture when it comes to the big picture of climate. So what does corporate capture at the global climate talks really look like? From the beginning, the fossil fuel industry and other big polluters have been inserting themselves into the talks to delay, weaken, and block climate policy. So corporate capture at the climate talks really illustrates the full range of corporate capture, including a lot of the manifestations that Fernanda referred to earlier, from policy interference to revolving door to economic diplomacy or bullying. So just to share a few examples of what that looks like. In this image here, you can see that fossil fuel corporations and their trade associations have actually sponsored the climate talks. So at COP19 in Warsaw, you can see PGE and Lotos are both Polish majority state-owned coal and oil companies. At that round of climate talks, the Polish government also supported a summit run by the industry-funded World Coal Association. This did prompt a massive walkout by civil society, which you can see here. But unfortunately, at COP24 in Poland, history repeated itself when a majority state-owned coal corporation sponsored the talks again. And this sponsorship gives industry legitimacy and power in the space, not to mention a kind of privileged access to government delegates that civil society members like us can only dream of. And unfortunately, sponsorship is also not where it ends. So fossil fuel corporations utilize a range of front groups and industry trade associations that you can see here to advance their interests in the talks. Groups like the International Chamber of Commerce or the International Emissions Trading Association, for short IATA, routinely represent and push the interests of industry in these talks. Taking a look at this web of influence, just consider that industry and trade organizations like these send hundreds of representatives to the talks, whereas some countries, especially Global South countries who are the least responsible for climate change but facing the worst effects, have only one representative. How are they going to advance their interests in the face of this enormous onslaught of very well-resourced industry representatives? And the interference goes deep. For example, individuals with close ties to the industry group IATA that I mentioned earlier and is shown here have actually negotiated on behalf of countries at the policymaking table. And just one more example here. And industry interference has been so normalized that at the last global climate meeting, this media article describes how a Shell executive effectively bragged about their influence shaping the Paris Agreement, specifically around pushing carbon markets. As a result of all this influence, corporations have managed to steer the talks towards industry-driven schemes that won't actually address the root causes of climate change. And in fact, they actually divert energy and resources from real solutions. In fact, some of their so-called solutions, including carbon markets, have become the primary focus of the talks at times. And ultimately, these schemes allow the industry to keep polluting while doing nothing to keep fossil fuels in the ground. So I could go on, but I think we've got the picture. So what can we do about all this? How can we protect climate policy, and in this case, the climate talks, from corporate capture? Well, fortunately, we have some experience to draw on from our campaigning on tobacco control. In the early 2000s, Corporate Accountability partnered with a global coalition of Global South allies, a coalition which is now called the Network for the Accountability of Tobacco Transnationals. You can see some of the leading individuals and organizations here, to pass a global tobacco control treaty that has now been ratified by 181 countries. The treaty contained powerful provisions forbidding corporate capture in many of its manifestations, from lobbying and revolving doors to corruption to so-called corporate social responsibility. And those provisions, which are pictured here, have been the backbone of the treaty, making it possible to implement public health policies across the world that have the potential to save millions of lives, and have given people and governments a tool to combat corporate capture itself. So learning from this history, in 2015, we partnered with global movements, and this is an image of the countries that are parties to that treaty. So in 2015, we partnered with global movements to launch an initiative to kick big polluters out of the climate talks, and have been partnering with global movements to demand climate justice and protect the UN climate talks from industry interference, in part by passing a conflict of interest policy that would exclude big polluters from participating in the climate negotiations, which they're seeking to undermine. Pause on that and imagine what it would look like if we achieve that. So the good news is that since we launched this campaign with global partners, there's been a groundswell of support from civil society organizations, growing government leadership, and also massive media attention. At the last climate talks, kicking big polluters out and protecting against corporate capture became really a global rallying cry for the movement that was there demanding people for solutions and ambition to address the climate crisis. In this extremely formal space, for those of you who've been at the UN, representatives of civil society organized this sit-down action because we knew that we had to take a dramatic stand to call on our governments to represent our interests and not the interests of global corporations. And this was many, many years in the making. So just prior to the meeting, we partnered with people's movements around the world to create and issue a global call rooted in the demands of Global South allies and those on the front line of climate change, what's been called the People's Demands. And this is the website here. The People's Demands articulate people-driven solutions for climate change, which you can see the top line here. And close to 400 organizations and hundreds of thousands of people from more than 130 countries all around the world joined this call. And with this grassroots support, governments are also standing up to the industry and global north countries like the US, EU, Norway, Canada. So time and time again, blocs representing large numbers of global south governments have called for a conflicts of interest policy to be advanced. This leadership from global south countries has ensured that at the next round of negotiations in June, there is an official space to discuss a conflicts of interest policy. This in and of itself is a huge victory for the global climate justice movement and corporate accountability movements. And with all this momentum, the media is taking notice too. So in May of 2017, the New York Times wrote a front page article highlighting these concerns about corporate capture at the climate talks, and there have been hundreds more articles since. So in closing, this year is going to be critical for the movement organizing to challenge corporate capture of the UN climate talks. There is obviously so much that we need to do to counter corporate capture of climate policy at every level, yet the progress that we've made at the international level in just 4 years indicates how much progress we can make if we work together to expose and demand an end to corporate capture itself with one voice, which is really why I'm delighted to be here with all of you today and to be a part of this network. So I would invite you in closing to join us in this work, to join and sign on to the People's Demands at peoplesdemands.org, and to contact me if you'd like to get more involved. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Shaida. That was a really clear presentation and a very good description of corporate capture at the UNFCCC. And also a good analysis of what people power can achieve. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. So last but not least of our presenters, we have Renzo Garcia Parra from Comité Ambiental on Defensa de la Vida. Renzo has been part of a movement that has been utilizing the corporate capture framework in its advocacy over the past couple of years. And he will be sharing with us details of La Colosa gold mine case in Colombia. The case illustrates corporate capture on the ground and how communities can respond to such capture. So without further ado, I'm going over to you, Renzo, now.
Bueno, un saludo especial para todos y para todas. Felicitar a Radiato, a Chaida, a Fernanda y a Mona por la presentación. Contarles rápidamente que lo que hemos hecho es tratar de mirar cómo aplicamos este marco que ha venido construyendo la RECDEX para hablar de lo que hoy en día sucede en Colombia en relación a la captura corporativa y el modelo de desarrollo extractivista que nos están imponiendo desde el gobierno nacional con todos los poderes, tanto el poder ejecutivo, legislativo, como el judicial. A nivel de contexto, tengo que decir que tenemos que resaltar que la constitución política nuestra, ¿sí?, es considerada una constitución ecológica en donde fundamentalmente se declara que el ambiente es un patrimonio común de toda la humanidad y además que es necesario para la supervivencia y desarrollo económico y social de los pueblos. Este, que es el elemento central de nuestra constitución política, ha venido desvertebrándose y justamente se viene aniquilando para poder facilitar la presencia y el ejercicio de los proyectos extractivistas en Colombia. Aquí en esta diapositiva lo que muestro es que esto viene ocurriendo de manera sistemática por varios años. Aquí básicamente estamos viendo cómo el gobierno le quita la exigencia de licencia ambiental a las multinacionales mineras para la fase de exploración, cuando esto era obligatorio según el decreto 1753 del año 1994. Entonces es clave que tengamos en cuenta este asunto. Esto se desarrolla fundamentalmente para imponernos este modelo. Aquí estamos viendo cómo el país está casi que superpuesto por muchos territorios de importancia ambiental con títulos y solicitudes mineras. Ahí estamos viendo cómo es la nueva minería que le quiere llegar a Colombia. Estamos hablando de minería de oro diseminado, de lixiviación con cianuro, en donde se extrae cerca de 1 gramo de oro por 1 tonelada de roca. Y en ese contexto es que queremos mostrar el tema de las expresiones de la cultura corporativa. Lo primero que hacen, digamos, esas multinacionales cuando llegan a los territorios es construir un ambiente favorable a su proyecto minero. Ambiente que se construye con la compra de conciencias, con la manipulación de la comunidad. Aquí estamos viendo cómo Anglo Gold Ashanti, que es la multinacional sudafricana que es dueña del proyecto minero de la Colosa en Cajamarca, Tolima, Colombia, ha financiado cooperativas de frijoleros, arracacheros, aguacateros, tuvo vínculos con la Cámara de Comercio y con el sector privado empresarial del departamento, con la Federación Nacional de Comerciantes, en fin, financiaron hasta el equipo deportivo regional que es el Deportes Tolima. Aquí vemos como un estudio que hace el Observatorio de Conflictos Ambientales de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia destaca cómo en la camiseta del Deportes Tolima aparece el logo y el nombre de esta empresa multinacional. Seguimos entonces con la segunda manifestación que ya abordaba Fernanda, que se llama la puerta giratoria. Aquí, aunque aparecen muchas letras, no acostumbro a hacerlo, pero creo que eso nos sirve como memoria. Aquí lo que quiero resaltar es cómo había o existió en Colombia en el año 2004 al 2007 un director de Ingeominas que se llama Julián Villarruel. Cuando este señor fue director de Ingeominas, que era la institución del Estado colombiano encargada de otorgar los títulos mineros, en su momento Anglo Gold pasó de tener 1.9 millones de hectáreas para exploración minera y pasa a 8.4 millones de hectáreas. Este señor, quien era el director de Ingeominas, luego pasa a ser un alto directivo de la empresa Anglo Gold, específicamente de la empresa Gramalote, que es una alianza, es una articulación entre Anglo Gold Ashanti y B2Gold. Pero aquí vemos es cómo pasó el director de Ingeominas a ser hoy un alto directivo de esta multinacional. Y lógicamente pues evidencia cómo en ese cargo le ayudó a esta multinacional a crecer en sus proyectos económicos y de presencia a nivel nacional. El tercer elemento es el de la interferencia política y legislativa. Y aquí palabras más, palabras menos. Abajo está el link de la noticia más completa. Pero aquí estamos viendo cómo los funcionarios de Anglo Gold Ashanti reconocen que financian la mayoría de partidos políticos de Colombia, excepto el Polo Democrático y el Partido Verde. Pero en general han reconocido que financian todos los partidos políticos, al Congreso, a las alcaldías, al Consejo, a las asambleas departamentales, y obviamente eso tiene la intención de mirar cómo ponen la ley del país, ¿sí?, en función de sus proyectos. Por eso es que hoy en día, por ejemplo, es legal, y lo hemos denunciado desde las comunidades, el saqueo y el despojo territorial. En esta diapositiva estamos viendo cómo el alcalde en su momento de Cajamarca, Tolima, el señor William Poveda, le decía a las comunidades que el cumplimiento de su plan de gobierno dependía casi que directamente de los recursos que le aportaba la multinacional minera Anglo Gold Ashanti y no de los recursos provenientes del Estado colombiano a través de los impuestos de la ciudadanía. Y este cuarto elemento, que es el de la interferencia en el sistema judicial, lo que muestra es cómo estas multinacionales hoy en día están controlando la Corte Constitucional del país. Una nueva Corte Constitucional, en donde hemos visto cómo con la salida de algunos magistrados, estos han venido siendo reemplazados por algunos abiertamente promineros, que en lugar de salvaguardar los principios de la Constitución Política Colombiana y los derechos fundamentales de las comunidades, lo que hacen es preservar, garantizar el interés económico de estas multinacionales minero-energéticas. Aquí tenemos en la imagen a tres magistrados, a Diana Fajardo, Alejandro Linares y Cristina Pardo, que vienen del sector extractivista. Diana Fajardo, cuando fue codirectora de la Agencia de Seguridad Jurídica del Estado, en ese momento atacaba, por ejemplo, el tema de las consultas populares, y hoy es magistrada de la Corte Constitucional. Alejandro Linares acababa de terminar su periodo como presidente de la Corte Constitucional, fue invitado por las empresas mineras a unos eventos que hacen en Cartagena de Indias, en Colombia, en donde ese señor casi que 2 años antes había dicho que había que limitar las consultas populares porque, en palabras de él, estaban deteniendo los proyectos minero-energéticos. Y Cristina Pardo, que fue asesora jurídica de Juan Manuel Santos, en cuyo cargo también emitió algunos decretos como el 934 que le prohibía a los municipios prohibir la minería, es decir, que estaba en contra de las actividades constitucionales, es la persona que hoy acaba de emitir, ¿sí?, una sentencia que recorta las consultas populares en nuestro país. Una sentencia que va en contra de marcos constitucionales, legales y jurisprudenciales. Y eso es lo que estamos denunciando hoy como Comité Ambiental en Defensa de la Vida y como Movimiento Nacional Ambiental. Aquí pasaríamos ya a un quinto elemento, que es la privatización de los servicios de seguridad pública. Estamos viendo cómo hoy casi que el 30% de toda la fuerza pública colombiana, es decir, cerca de 100.000 soldados y policías, se encuentran al servicio de las empresas minero-energéticas, no resguardando la seguridad de los colombianos o los tolimenses, sino resguardando las inversiones económicas de estas multinacionales. Recientemente ocurrió aquí en el Tolima que llegó la autoridad ambiental, en este caso se llama Cortolima, llegó al oriente del Tolima a tratar de fiscalizar unas denuncias que hacía la comunidad frente a la presencia de una petrolera que se llama Petrobras, y lo que sucedió es que la fuerza pública impidió el acceso de la autoridad ambiental y no se pudo corroborar en su momento todas las afectaciones ambientales que estaban ocurriendo en ese territorio. Pasaríamos al sexto elemento, que es la diplomacia económica. Aquí vemos cómo Peter Tiber, que era embajador del Reino Unido en Colombia, visita el proyecto de la Colosa y casi que en todos los medios de comunicación y en la página web de la empresa, este embajador del Reino Unido resalta la importancia de desarrollar este proyecto extractivista. Pasaríamos a las dos últimas, que es el tema de la construcción de narrativas. Aquí básicamente lo que quiero un poco resaltar es cómo las multinacionales y el gobierno tratan de construir una sola visión de mundo que nos ancla al único modelo de desarrollo para ellos, que es el capitalismo, el crecimiento extractivista, lo cual es contradictorio con lo que históricamente han venido desarrollando las comunidades. Acá vemos cómo estas multinacionales lo primero que hacen cuando llegan al territorio es controlar, contratar a los medios masivos de comunicación y con ello tratar de generar ese ambiente favorable a su proyecto minero, esa lógica de sociedad que se ancla al desarrollo o al crecimiento económico vía extractivismo. Aquí estamos viendo incluso cómo esos medios de comunicación tergiversan la información, no están transmitiendo información veraz, sino que todo el tiempo lo que hacen es transmitir la propaganda que le pagan los medios mineros. Y la última es el tema de la captura de las instituciones académicas.
Y como que llegamos a la...
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So there are a few questions that Renzo had a problem with his energy that then put down his connection to the internet, so he apologizes for that. And I will be just trying to answer a couple of questions that were there for the presenters. So one question was to clarify the concept of revolving door. So the concept of revolving door refers to this practice when public servants, let's say someone from a ministry, from the Ministry of Mining, after his period or her period, moves to the same sector in the economy to a corporation, for example, a mining corporation. So then they take all that privilege information with them, and that can favor the operations and the profit of the corporation. In some countries now, they are promoting laws to implement what has been called a cooling period of, let's say, a couple of years between leaving that public function and being able to join a corporation in the same sector of the economy. They could pursue a career in the private sector, but in a different industry or sector of the economy, so that that privilege information they had access to when they were public servants doesn't is not being transferred to a corporation in that same sector that can benefit from that information. And then the revolving door can also go in the opposite sense. Let's say a person that works for a corporation that develops, energy, and then goes to the Ministry of Energy to work, can try and use that new position in the public sector to benefit the previous corporation where they were working. For example, by implementing public policy that is favorable for that corporation, or granting them with concessions or permits to operate and granting them projects. And then, so that's on revolving door. I hope it's a bit more clear. And then the other question that was addressed to me was to clarify a little bit the difference between lobbying and corporate capture. So corporate capture consists of different ways of trying to influence the public decision-making spheres and communities in favor of transnational capital and corporate activities. So it can manifest in different ways, and lobbying could be one manifestation if it's used to influence a law reform that will benefit a sector. For example, in Mexico, where lobbying is not legal as it is in other countries, when the energy reform passed in 2013, it was a huge structural reform that allowed private investment to come into the country. And before that, we had a monopoly of the state-owned corporation company, Pemex. That was done in a couple of months, very fast, no participation from civil society or experts, and it was privatizing the national natural resources, the most important one that we had for our economy. And then we documented the influence of some corporate lobbyists that had to do this very subtly because it's not allowed. They cannot be around, walking in Congress as we can see it in the US and other countries. And so that is one manifestation of unlawful influence of corporations in the legislative sector. But so then lobbying, if it's well regulated, can be legal, for sure. It's legal in many countries, but it can also constitute one of the many manifestations of corporate capture. So I hope that clarifies it. Thank you. And back to you, Mona. I think there are other questions for other presenters.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fernanda, for answering these questions. That was very helpful. So we have Renzo back after a power cut. I'm very happy to give him back the floor now. Renzo?
Bueno, vuelvo de nuevo. Qué pena que tuvimos ahí una ida de la energía, pero quiero terminar con esta última diapositiva en donde hacemos referencia a una de las expresiones que es la última captura de instituciones académicas. Aquí fundamentalmente quiero relatar cómo en algún momento Anglo Chanti trató de contratar, de hacer un convenio con la Universidad Pública del Departamento del Tolima, que es la Universidad del Tolima. Ese convenio era para adelantar un monitoreo ambiental después de que la empresa llevaba más de 3 años haciendo actividades exploratorias en el territorio. En ese momento la comunidad estudiantil, el movimiento universitario salió en rechazo de ese convenio, por más de que esos recursos económicos que quería entregarle en su momento la multinacional minera a la Universidad del Tolima eran muy necesarios para estas universidades, dada la debilidad presupuestal que tienen hoy en día. Era un proyecto cercano a los $700 mil dólares, ¿sí? Estoy hablando de cerca de 1.700 millones de pesos. Ese proyecto se logra detener por la presión del movimiento estudiantil, pero la multinacional lo que hace es irse para otra universidad regional, que es la Universidad de Caldas, hacia otro departamento de Colombia, en donde el convenio es aprobado sin ningún tipo de discusión, se hace a referendo vía telefónica con todo el Consejo Superior de la Universidad de Caldas y se pasa de cerca de 1.700 millones a 2.600 millones de pesos. Es decir, en ese momento cerca de $1 millón para adelantar esta actividad. ¿Cuál era la preocupación nuestra en el momento? Que los proyectos, que el convenio tenía una cláusula de confidencialidad y de conformidad. ¿Qué significaba eso? Que por más de que era la universidad pública regional la que hacía el monitoreo y el estudio, todo el estudio, toda la información, la investigación que se recabara no iba a ser permitida para su acceso a las comunidades, sino que se iba a limitar. Eso era solamente control y para un manejo exclusivo de la multinacional. Y cuando se habla en la cláusula de conformidad, es que la multinacional también podía decir que no estaba de acuerdo con los resultados. Y eso fue justamente lo que rechazamos nosotros como funcionarios, profesores y con algunos estudiantes de la universidad, y logramos detener esta última expresión de la captura corporativa que se llama la captura de las instituciones académicas. Yo terminaría con esta última diapositiva, la expresión de cómo se presenta la captura corporativa extractivista en el Estado colombiano, específicamente en el caso de la Colosa. Le agradezco, Mona, y a los demás compañeros por ayudarme ahí a cubrir y a solventar el problema de energía. Bueno.
Thank you very much, Renzo, for that presentation. I think you've captured very well how corporations can shape narratives and capture academia and work in very many different manifestations of corporate capture to influence government policies. So I do recognize that it's 10 a.m., but so thank you for all who have stuck with us until now. I would like to ask maybe one more question. So I would like to invite you to stay with us for a couple more minutes if you can. We had one question about how we can try to prevent corporate capture through the binding treaty that is, or the draft binding treaty that's now ongoing in terms of negotiations at the United Nations in Geneva. And I'll try to have Shaida, if possible. It would be great to get your opinion on this issue in particular.
Fantastic. Yeah, that is a great question. I think we have a really historic opportunity in the next year to advance a binding treaty to hold transnational corporations accountable for human rights abuses through the United Nations process, which has been ongoing for a number of years now. We've really made greater gains in that process than I have ever seen in my lifetime, and even before then. So I think members who are on this call, ESCR-Net is a part of the Treaty Alliance, and also many of us are part of the Global Campaign. These are critical coalitions driving forward civil society support for a global binding treaty. And I think the Global Campaign, for example, has a joint proposal language for the treaty. And within that proposal, there is language around protecting against corporate capture that is modeled on the precedents of the Tobacco Treaty. So I would invite any members of this network who are interested in a binding treaty to protect human rights and who are interested in countering corporate capture to contact me, and I can put you in touch with the relevant coalitions and actors and find ways for you to get involved. There's a next negotiation session coming up in October that will be a really critical moment for the future of not only advancing the treaty and real access to justice for communities across the globe, but also in enshrining a principle of corporate capture in the context of that binding treaty. So I could talk a lot more, but given time, I'll pass it over. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Shaida, for answering that question. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. And thank you all very much for being with us today. We hope that you found this useful. There was a lot of questions in the chat box about collective action and what we can do together as a collective to ensure that we end corporate capture. And this is very much the goal of the corporate capture project within the ESCR network. We are trying collectively to identify effective policies and reforms to ensure an end to undue influence of corporations, to an end to corporate capture and its different manifestations, and to highlight how communities are resisting corporate capture and how we can resist together. I'm not sure if there's a few saying that you cannot hear me. I'm going to try to refresh. Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Please, no, yes, okay. So yes, thank you very much again for being with us. And we very much encourage you to reach out to us if you think that your community is facing cases of corporate capture. We invite you to think with us as well of how we can make sure to end corporate capture and ensure that there are effective policies and reforms implemented to end corporate capture. So with that, thank you very much. And please note that we hope to maybe put together some other webinars or discussions to look into the different strategies of how we tackle the different manifestations of corporate capture and how we can work collectively and together on these issues. So with that, I thank you very much, and we hope to follow up with you by email. One last thing is we have the video now that we were going to show you at the beginning of the presentation. So it's only 3 minutes and a half about. And if you are able to, please feel free to take a few moments to watch it. So we'll go to the video now. Thank you.
The coal mining company promised us jobs, development, and a booming economy. Some of us did get jobs, but life became harder, with little control over our daily schedule. And soon, our baby got sick, with no signs of getting better. And we weren't the only ones who were getting sick. I had to get to the bottom of this. What I found was a complicated story involving elected representatives and business people working together and changing any law that got in their way. This problem is bigger than me. I knew I had to join with other voices to be heard. They heard me and tried to silence me, and it felt hopeless. The doctors, politicians, the police all believed that the company was only trying to help. Thanks to a network of human rights defenders, I got my freedom back. And my voice is even louder now, because this problem is bigger than our community. It's not just about one coal mining company taking over our community, our health, and our lives. It's how they do it. And how did the people who are supposed to represent us begin speaking for the company and convincing us to trust the company too? It's a complicated story, but one thing is clear. company profits are being considered more valuable than our lives. So how do we fight for people over profits? The human rights community has started to use the words corporate capture to refer to this trend of corporations taking over our hard-won democratic institutions. Corporate capture happens when companies manipulate our local governments for their own private profit. It happens when politicians favor the corporate donors who funded their campaigns over the people they're elected to represent. It happens when elected officials go on to work for the corporations they used to regulate, and when corporate employees get appointed to public positions. Because corporations understand the power that we have as a community, they invest their resources to convince us that they are socially responsible corporations. Much like with what happened to us here, that mining company opened up a community hospital and donated medicine to distract us from knowing that they're contributing to the cause of our illness. All of this is corporate capture. Together, we must start exposing corporate capture and demand that our governments do their jobs and protect our rights. Do you think you've seen corporate capture happening in your community? Share your story by answering this short survey at ESCR-Net.org/CC.
All right, so with that, we come to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much to the presenters, and thank you very much for everybody who joined us today. And we hope to hear from you in the very near future, or be in contact with you in the very near future. So thank you, and goodbye.